It has been reported that TNA Wrestling are shopping around their media rights for their flagship show TNA iMPACT. A new report suggests that TNA iMPACT could be set to land on a WWE-affiliated network and possibly even go head-to-head against AEW Dynamite on Wednesdays. With that in mind, we're going to go through some major contenders, what it could mean for iMPACT, what it could mean for TNA Wrestling in this countdown video. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of stories to get into in the world of professional wrestling. And one of the biggest stories right now, of course, is TNA Wrestling's media rights and specifically their flagship show, TNA iMPACT. Could it be set to move from Access TV, also owned by Anthem, to a bigger, more mainstream network and possibly even compete with All Elite Wrestling's flagship show, AEW Dynamite, on Wednesday head-to-head in the same time slot? Now, we've known for several weeks, several months, TNA President Carlos Silva has not been shy about discussing that he is actively in discussions with several big networks about shopping around the media rights, the broadcast rights to TNA iMPACT. Now, for the last 6 years, wrestling fans in the United States, anyway, have tuned into TNA iMPACT through the Anthem-owned Access TV channel, or alternatively, the TNA Plus app. In addition to that, you can watch it on YouTube. There were points in time you could watch it as well on other streaming platforms. But recently, TNA President Carlos Silva revealed that TNA Wrestling has been in discussions for a new media rights deal since the beginning of this year, 2025, specifically with the aim of expanding its TV presence. And according to a report from John Alba of the Takedown on SI this week, reports that TNA have explored the possibility of moving iMPACT, its flagship show, to a WWE-affiliated TV station. Along with that change, TNA officials are also said to be open to shifting the airing of iMPACT from Thursday nights to Wednesday nights. Of course, since 2019, All Elite Wrestling has broadcasted AEW Dynamite, its respective flagship show, on Wednesday evenings. Reporter Andrew Bedelia confirmed the news and indicated that a time slot of either 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern or 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday nights is being considered for future episodes of iMPACT. Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter also corroborated the report. Now, when SI reached out to Silva for a comment on the matter, Silva noted that any potential move made by TNA is not done for the sake of competition, but rather to keep the company's best interests at the forefront. Sources for SI suggested that WWE appears to have some influence amid TNA's media rights conversations. According to Silva, though, TNA's present partnership with WWE has not gone beyond the scope of cross-promotional appearances and advertising. Now, so this has got a lot of people talking. Of course, if you're going to go head-to-head with AEW Dynamite on Wednesdays on TBS, you're going to have to move to a network that's got a similar kind of pool of viewership, a similar pool of availability as TBS, a strongly backed WBD network. But there are several networks that WWE has affiliations with that certainly could be that kind of strong enough network to go up against AEW's flagship show. So let's get into just some of the potential landing spots for TNA iMPACT. Let's begin with the CW. Now, this one is something that has been spoke about quite a lot recently. Now, earlier this month, rumors pointed to the CW as a potential new home for TNA Wrestling. Now, it does make a lot of sense, of course, because the CW, that's the broadcast partner for WWE NXT. And they've been very, very happy with the viewership numbers of WWE NXT. And they've also been very happy with the key demographic ratings for WWE NXT as well. Now, NXT is really the key player in the working relationship between WWE and TNA Wrestling. It's largely NXT talent that's appearing on TNA Wrestling programming and at TNA pay-per-views and PLEs, and it's largely TNA iMPACT, or TNA Wrestling talent rather, that's appearing on WWE NXT television each week on the CW, or appearing at, of course, NXT PLEs. Now, sometimes you get a bit of main roster crossover. We, of course, saw Joe Hendry face off against Randy Orton at WrestleMania. He was the TNA World Champion at the time. We've also seen AJ Styles return to TNA at Slammiversary, but it's largely left to WWE NXT and TNA. Of course, given the fact that NXT is airing on the CW and the amount of TNA talent we see on a week-to-week basis on the show, and the amount of exposure we see of TNA on NXT. Look, 2 NXT superstars are currently 2 world champions in TNA. Of course, we have Trick Williams being the TNA world champion. JC Jane is the TNA Knockouts world champion. And every single episode of NXT at this point, we see some kind of TNA crossover. It would make sense that TNA Impact airs on the same network. And if that is the case, that would mean TNA Impact would be airing on broadcast television. So there would be a huge scope for people to tune in regularly now. It wasn't the case during the Wednesday Night Wars when NXT was on USA Network and AEW Dynamite was on TNT and then on TBS. Regularly back then, you would see AEW Dynamite outscore NXT in terms of total viewership and also in the key demographic. Now, that's not necessarily the case. NXT most weeks defeats AEW Dynamite in total viewership. In terms of the key demographic, it's usually a bit more close, and there's an argument to be made that it's a older audience when it comes to AEW Dynamite because the show is also being simulcast on HBO Max and younger viewers watch it on HBO Max. I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole, but there could be a suggestion that, well, it's already been proven that if you air a show, a pro wrestling show on the CW, the chances are it will bring in more viewers. And if it brings in more viewers on a Wednesday night in the same time slot that Dynamite is airing in, that will hurt AEW and that will hurt the ratings and the viewership for that show. So given the fact that TNA wrestlers, and there's a huge TNA influence already on the WWE programming on the CW, it would make sense that Impact could land there. Now, again, how interested the CW is, we'll have to wait and see, but it does feel like that could be a possibility. Of course, previously, prior to it being announced that WWE were bringing NXT to the network, it looked like the NWA were going to have a big influence on that network, and it looks like that deal kind of fell apart because WWE, of course, had NXT move over there. Initially, they had NWA Power just on the CW streaming app, and then it just never really came together in the end. But still, we could see TNA going to the CW. Now, before we get to the next number on the list, the next network that TNA Impact could appear on, we've got to talk about NordVPN. This video has been created in collaboration with NordVPN. Now, right now, WWE just announced a brand new United States media rights deal that will see all of their PLEs head to ESPN's new streaming service beginning in 2026. And there's a bit of uncertainty about how much that's going to cost you, the consumer, and how much you could be charged to watch WWE PLEs beginning in 2026. Meanwhile, over here in the UK, we get to watch every episode of Raw, SmackDown, NXT, every single PLE, including WrestleMania, SummerSlam, the Royal Rumble, and Survivor Series, plus a selection of WWE archive shows as part of our regular Netflix subscription. We also get to watch episodes of Saturday Night's Main Event on YouTube for free, and you can too with NordVPN. All you have to do is get a plan with NordVPN and have a virtual private network. What's that? Well, this is a service that protects your internet connection and privacy online. VPNs create an encrypted tunnel for your data, protect your online identity by hiding your IP address, and allow you to use public Wi-Fi hotspots safely. This allows you to change your location to countries all over the world, including here in the UK. Therefore, you can have access to programs on streaming services like Netflix and YouTube that won't be available to you in your country. Therefore, you can join the rest of us and watch episodes of Raw, SmackDown, NXT, and WWE PLEs as part of your regular Netflix subscription. So what are you waiting for? Get yourself a plan with NordVPN by scanning the QR code on the screen or clicking the link in the video description or the pinned comment in the comment section. Right now, you can get up to 72% off and an Amazon gift card too. The bigger the plan, the bigger the reward. Scan the QR code, click the link in the video description or the pinned comment in the comment section and get NordVPN today. Now, if not the CW, many people have speculated and it has been reported that TNA Impact could end up on A&E, which again would make sense. A&E can't get enough WWE programming. A&E has been partnering with WWE for programming for the best part of, 5 years at this point, maybe even longer, with a ton of original content on that show. They've done Biography, WWE Legends, which was sort of a documentary series, and of course A&E's most known when it comes to WWE for doing these kind of documentary kind of series, but recently they have actually moved into even more original programming, which we'll talk about in just a second. But they've done shows like Biography, WWE Legends, they've also done WWE Rivals, they've done WWE, was it Greatest Treasures or Hidden Treasures, I think it was, where they would go around and try and find people that had collected merchandise. So they're always looking to create more original programming with WWE, because WWE has been very big and done very, very well for A&E on the network and delivered very high viewership and very high ratings. Now, not high enough viewership or high enough ratings that it could necessarily compete with AEW. Recently, they've of course debuted WWE LFG, which is their most original program to date. It's kind of a hybrid between storyline and Tough Enough, a reality show where you've got WWE legends and Hall of Famers like The Undertaker, Bubba Ray Dudley, Booker T, Mickey James, and others. They kind of try and nurture people that are athletes or people that are new to pro wrestling, and one wins an NXT contract. It's very Tough Enough-esque and reality show-esque, but it is still scripted reality, and that's done very, very well for A&E. So much so they've already renewed it for future seasons. They were desperate to keep The Undertaker on board to do it. Of course, he was a big draw on that. So you could certainly see A&E looking at that going, if we can have an actual pro wrestling show on the network, because of course LFG does feature actual matches, if we can have a full original wrestling show on the network, that might be doing even better, and maybe they don't have to pay as much because it's not WWE. So certainly you could see a situation there where they have TNA go over. The real speculation on that is, would A&E be a strong enough network to go head-to-head with AEW Dynamite on a Wednesday, or do WWE and TNA not care? It's a bigger network than they're currently on with Access TV. It's got greater availability, and even if it takes a couple of 100,000 viewers away from AEW Dynamite, it'd be doing what WWE wants. That would still be hurting the competition, and they'd be thrilled with that. So you could see a situation, certainly, where A&E do decide to make an offer to TNA for Impact. Now let's get into some other networks they could possibly appear on. These ones necessarily haven't been linked, but could certainly be feasible. Let's begin with the Tubi streaming service. Why? Because the reports state that several WWE affiliated networks or streamers could be a possible landing spot for TNA Wrestling. Now, Tubi, if you're not familiar, it's a streaming platform. It's been owned by the Fox Corporation since 2020, and WWE has been very clever and wise about their recent media rights deals they've done. They kind of touch all areas of what modern day television looks like. They've got traditional cable networks like USA Network, that of course is owned by NBC Universal, Comcast. They've got Netflix, which is of course the market leader when it comes to streaming, a big organization like Netflix. In addition to that, as I mentioned, they've got broadcast television like they've got with the CW, and also they still got this loose relationship with Fox in the form of Tubi, and on that you have WWE Evolve, which does, ironically enough, air every Wednesday at the same time as AEW Dynamite. Now, it doesn't really do any damage at all, one would think. We don't know the viewership numbers for WWE Evolve on Tubi. Many people just think it's just a way for WWE to maintain a relationship with Fox, because of course they had that really strong relationship that began back in 2019, where SmackDown aired on Fox Live every Friday. In addition to that, you have the WWE Backstage show on FS1, but ultimately SmackDown moved from Fox to the USA Network. Why? Because Fox felt that SmackDown was too expensive, and they couldn't necessarily justify paying for the show. It did deliver really well in terms of rating and viewership, particularly in the Triple H era and the TKO era. It delivered very, very high viewership and ratings, particularly for pro wrestling, and pro wrestling is generally cheaper to produce than other forms of television. But they weren't necessarily happy with their return on investment, so they ultimately passed on the media rights there. But WWE, of course, wants to keep a relationship with Fox. It's a massive broadcaster in the United States. So because of that, they had WWE Evolve on Tubi. Could TNA Impact go there? Yes, you could certainly see a situation whereby TNA Impact goes to that, but again, would that be the platform to realistically compete with Dynamite on a Wednesday? you don't really think so, so you feel like it's kind of unlikely. Now, what about SciFi? SciFi is an interesting one because SciFi has long had a relationship with WWE, of course. Not necessarily just because of the fact that it's owned by NBC Universal. Comcast is actually changing hands relatively soon. It's actually being spun off into a separate company. Comcast actually announced plans in November of last year to place SciFi and other cable properties into a spin-off company. Now, this move comes amid declines in linear television, accelerated by cord cutting. We saw this a lot in the pandemic. People couldn't justify paying for many cable subscriptions, and they felt like because everyone was streaming everything nowadays, they didn't even need cable anymore. Now, in May, just a couple of months ago, it was announced that the spin-off company is called Versant, and that's going to be where SciFi lives. So it's still going to be under the same umbrella. It's still going to have the same affiliations. And of course, SciFi has a rich history of airing WWE programming, whether it be WWE ECW back in the mid-2000s, whether it be, of course, WWE SmackDown as well in the 2000s. We also saw as recently as last year, WWE NXT actually was broadcast on SciFi when it was bumped from USA Network due to coverage of the Olympics. So it's got a rich tie of having wrestling on the channel, particularly WWE affiliated wrestling, and it's a big enough network that certainly you feel like that could absolutely compete with a cable network such as TBS or TNT, and it would be really interesting to see if SciFi would take a gamble on that, because of course SciFi took a bit of a gamble on WWE ECW. In the end, it didn't turn out to be necessarily what many people thought it was going to be, and in the end it became WWE's version of ECW, not the ECW of the 1990s. But given the fact that it's now in its new company and they're kind of maybe trying to re-establish it, rebrand it, maybe, just maybe, kind of original wrestling programming could land on there. And given the fact that WWE has strong ties with NBC Universal, Comcast, you can't necessarily rule out them opening the doors so TNA can have their flagship show broadcast on that cable network. And finally, keeping with, of course, NBC Universal and Comcast, what about the USA Network? USA Network, WWE, they've gone hand in hand for decades. Of course, it was the original broadcast home of WWE Monday Night Raw back in 1993. It held that show for many years before it moved to TNN and then Spike, and then eventually came back in the mid-2000s. And pretty much every WWE brand you can think of has aired on USA Network, particularly the big ones. Currently, Raw is on Netflix. That means, though, that USA Network still has that relationship with WWE. SmackDown airs there every Friday. Previously, as part of the last media rights deal, WWE NXT aired on SciFi. And actually, SciFi on USA Network. And actually, USA Network has lost a lot of WWE programming over the course of this new media rights deal. Because, of course, at one point of time, last year, every single WWE show aired on USA Network. Before Raw moved to Netflix, we had a situation where Raw, NXT, and SmackDown all aired on USA Network. It's a very short, brief period of time. But we had a situation where every single show was on the network. They're big fans of pro wrestling. Pro wrestling has always delivered for USA Network in whatever time slot, whatever brand it is, how strong the roster is, how strong it isn't. They've always had it. In fact, there were rumors, speaking of ECW, in the late 1990s, early 2000s, that maybe they were going to pick up USA Network when Raw left. USA Network was going to pick up ECW, rather, when Raw left it. Not the case. So certainly, they've always had an interest. And you feel like if you really wanted to compete, obviously, with AEW Dynamite on Wednesdays, that would be the one to do it. Now, USA Network did have WWE NXT when the Wednesday Night Wars happened originally in 2019 into 2020. And of course, AEW Dynamite easily won the Wednesday Night Wars, so much so that WWE NXT moved from Wednesdays to Tuesdays to get out of it because they were losing every single week. But now, AEW doesn't bring in the viewers that it used to, maybe doesn't bring in the ratings that it used to, and maybe this would be the perfect platform for TNA Impact to go on. It would cost significantly less for USA than to buy extra WWE programming. As I mentioned, they've gone from having 3 hours of Raw, 2 hours of NXT, and 2 hours of SmackDown from going and eventually they moved to 3 hours of SmackDown, but then back to 2 hours of SmackDown. So they've gone from having all of those hours of WWE programming to just 2 hours of SmackDown every Friday. So if they wanted to get more wrestling programming, they could certainly do so by getting TNA Impact, and that would certainly be an interesting competition between TNA and AEW on Wednesdays, because when we saw NXT compete on a couple of occasions with AEW Dynamite on Wednesdays when they had to move to when AEW had to move to Tuesdays when they did Title Tuesday Dynamite, WWE NXT won every single time. Now WWE did stack the shows with the likes of John Cena, The Undertaker, Cody Rhodes, and others, but it would be interesting to see if they could do something similar on Wednesday night. So we'll have to wait and see, certainly. So there you go, guys. There are 5 networks that potentially TNA Impact could land on and possibly compete with AEW Dynamite on Wednesdays. What are your thoughts? Where do you think TNA will land? Do you think they will compete with AEW Dynamite? Let me know your thoughts, as always, in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.